Clara had never imagined that a single phone call could turn her world upside down. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her small apartment in the city, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass and thinking about the quiet life she had built for herself after years of endless struggle. She had always believed that love and stability were things she had to earn slowly, patiently, carefully, like a gardener tending a fragile plant. And yet here she was on the verge of a decision that felt like it could uproot everything. She glanced down at her phone and saw the name that had been haunting her dreams for weeks. Jason Whitmore, the billionaire, whose name was whispered in every corner of the financial world, whose reputation was as polished as the cars in his collection, and whose smile could disarm even the most guarded hearts, had just left her a message that made her palms sweat and her heart race. Clara had met Jason months ago at a charity gala she had been reluctantly attending for her cousin, who insisted she needed to expand her social circle. She had arrived in a modest dress, carrying nothing but a small clutch and a skeptical smile. She had expected boring conversations about stocks and yachts. Instead, she found herself engaged in a conversation that was startlingly normal. Jason had asked her opinion about a book she had read and had laughed at a joke she had thought was too obscure for anyone to get. He had looked at her in a way that suggested he was seeing more than just the surface, and for the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen. And that was dangerous, because she was not a woman who believed in fairy tales. But Clara knew better than to trust first impressions. Especially with people like Jason, wealth had a way of warping intentions, and she had friends who had lost themselves to men like him, who offered the world but demanded everything in return. She tried to shake the memory from her mind, but the text had come again. "Let him know you are my husband." The words jumped from the screen as if they were carved into her brain. She stared at it, unable to process what it meant or why he would say such a thing. She had never claimed to be married or involved in anyone. And yet the message carried a weight that made her body tense like a violin string about to snap. Meanwhile, across town, Jason Whitmore was sitting in his office surrounded by walls of glass and the muted hum of the city below. He stared at the same phone in his hand, rereading the message he had sent. He had always been meticulous in planning every aspect of his life. But this was different. Clara was different. There was an authenticity about her that had disarmed him in ways he had not experienced in years. He had never been the type to manipulate feelings or orchestrate events, yet here he was asking her to tell someone something that was not technically true but necessary. He knew the potential fallout could be disastrous. But he also knew that without this small deception, certain doors would never open. He leaned back in his leather chair and closed his eyes, imagining the chaos and excitement that was about to enter both their lives. The city lights blurred behind his eyes, and for the first time in months, he felt an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. Clara put the phone down and paced across her apartment. She thought about the implications and tried to reason with herself about saying anything at all. Considered her own life, the routines she had built, the friends she trusted, the safety of her predictable existence, and then she thought about the man who had asked her to become part of a secret that could shatter or elevate everything she realized, that nothing would ever be the same again. That night, as the rain fell harder against the windows, she made a decision that would propel her into a world of opulence and danger, a world where truth and illusion intertwined, and where her own courage would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. The next morning, Clara woke with a heaviness in her chest that made even the simplest movements feel like a struggle. She had rehearsed what she would say in her mind over and over again, each version, feeling both daring and terrifying. She had to meet Jason at his penthouse apartment for what he called a briefing, but Clara suspected it was more than that. The elevator ride up felt longer than it should have, with every floor ticking by like a countdown. She gripped the strap of her bag tightly, wishing she could turn back time and erase the strange text from her life. But she knew that was impossible. The doors opened to a space that seemed to float above the city with walls of glass, revealing skyscrapers like shards of light piercing the gray morning sky. Jason was there, waiting by the edge of the living room, sipping his coffee with that calm, composed expression that made him seem untouchable and yet vulnerable all at once. He looked at her as she stepped inside, and for a brief moment she felt like the entire world had shrunk down to the two of them. Clara tried to steady her voice as she said good morning, but Jason did not respond immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the expansive sofa, and she sat feeling exposed in the way only strangers with shared secrets can make someone feel. He set his coffee down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked onto hers like he was trying to read her soul. She swallowed hard and asked the question she had been avoiding. "Did you mean what you said last night?" He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, and yet a strange thrill ran through her as well. He explained in a voice that was both calm and commanding that a powerful investor had been inquiring about him, and certain rumors were circulating about his personal life. The investor had a peculiar request to meet the wife of Jason Whitmore, and if he did not provide one, the deal that could reshape his business empire might collapse. Clara could barely breathe, processing the absurdity of it all. She was not married, she had never claimed to be, and yet here she was being asked to step into a role that was completely foreign to her, and at the same time strangely intoxicating. Jason watched her struggle with the truth and offered reassurance. He promised that nothing permanent was required, that she could back out at any moment, and that he would protect her from any scrutiny. But he also warned that once she stepped into this world, there would be no simple return to her ordinary life. She imagined the invitations, the formal dinners, the extravagant parties where everyone would be watching and calculating and realizing that she was not what she appeared to be. Her heart raced as she considered the risks, but at the same time a tiny spark of excitement flickered. She had always dreamed of adventure, of stepping outside the narrow corridors of her life, and now the opportunity was standing before her like a key to a locked door after what felt like an eternity. Clara nodded her agreement to help Jason in this delicate charade. They spent the morning rehearsing scenarios, practicing conversations, discussing names, relationships, and small details that would lend credibility to her sudden entrance into his carefully constructed universe. By noon, she felt dizzy with the weight of the secret they were about to carry. She left his penthouse feeling both exhilarated and terrified, knowing that every step she took from now on would be under scrutiny, and yet she could not deny the magnetic pull that Jason exerted over her. The city streets seemed louder, the crowds more chaotic, and every glance from strangers felt like a silent test. She realized that this was no longer about a simple favor. It was the beginning of a life that would challenge every assumption she had about herself and about the world around her. That evening, Clara stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the elegant dress Jason had chosen for her. She tried to imagine herself as his wife, as a woman who could move through this glittering world with confidence and poise. She took a deep breath and whispered to her reflection, "I can do this." The sound of her own voice steadied her nerves, even as a shiver of doubt lingered at the edge of her mind. She knew that tomorrow would bring the first test of their secret, and that the consequences of failure could be more than embarrassing. They could be devastating. The following day, Clara found herself standing at the entrance of an opulent mansion on the outskirts of the city. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she was playing a role that carried weight, that could shift the balance of power in ways she did not fully understand. The sun glinted off the marble steps, and crystal chandeliers shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows as she ascended, feeling the gravity of the secret she was about to carry. Jason had insisted she arrive first, and he would join her. Moments later, she adjusted her posture, smoothed the fabric of her dress and rehearsed the lines they had practiced, but the butterflies in her stomach refused to settle. Inside the grand hall, she was greeted by a flurry of staff and aides who moved around with precision and purpose. Clara realized that every detail from the flowers to the lighting had been orchestrated to perfection and that the eyes of the guests would be measuring everything about her. Jason had arrived, just as she was feeling the weight of scrutiny pressing against her like a physical force. He took her hand in a subtle gesture of reassurance and whispered, "I will be right here." She nodded silently, feeling a mix of fear and excitement that she could not quite separate. The first few moments were formal, polite smiles and measured handshakes until the key figure arrived. The investor, a man whose reputation for shrewd decisions preceded him and whose presence could make or break empires. Clara felt her heart rate spike as Jason guided her introduction.